The sound of gunfire continues to plague Minneapolis's North Side community. Many who live there tell us that they hear gunshots day and night. Just today, shots were fired near an elementary school. As Reg Chapman shares, it is a problem that has an entire community on edge and calling for change.
February 27, 2024 was another quiet morning in North Minneapolis, a neighborhood of a city rife with murder. It was as normal as it could get for residents living in an area known as a gang war zone, as feuding crews along one main street fought to the death for the right to sell fent in the hood. What started as one man shooting another quickly collapsed into an endless cycle of murder. Blood in, blood out. That afternoon, a small group of people had been standing outside the Minneapolis Market, a well-liked convenience store that sold goods ranging from frozen foods and snacks to clothes, shoes, toiletries, and even bongs. The group standing outside, however, soon became witnesses to a violent shooting led by Albert Lucas V, Antonio Deshawn Timberlake, and Victor Collins, young gangbangers looking to defend their turf. In the frenzy of gunfire, Pierre Romel Miller lay dead. Minneapolis Market was in South Minneapolis, a region far from the violence of North Minneapolis, but equally as violent in its own way. The city had been rocked over the past few years by two gangs, the highs and the lows, looking to make a name for themselves and kill as many rivals as possible. Miller's death was a tragedy, but in a region that reported almost one homicide per day that year, it was one of hundreds police had to investigate outside a store that had witnessed similar shootings in the past. This is the story of Minneapolis's newest, most violent gangland conflict.
RICO trials prosecuting members of the Highs Street Gang in Minneapolis. 38 of the 40 Highs gang members indicted have now been convicted.
We're essentially attacking the gang itself and the membership of it.
Acting U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson says they've heard from North Minneapolis community members that since the initiative started, they've been able to go to parks, gas stations, and stores that previously were off limits.
Where in the past they were open-air drug markets and there were regular shootings, now it's safe for citizens and their children to go.
This year, there have been 58 gunshot wound victims in North Minneapolis where the Highs and rival Lows gang members operate. That's well below the 81 at this point last year, and as you can see, exponentially less than 2021's high point.
Minneapolis is, without a doubt, a violent city. The homicide rate peaked in 2021 with a rate of almost one homicide every day. Other crimes are rampant in the city, including human trafficking, theft, and even animal abuse. All of these factors, including the intimidating influence of local gangs and the foreign hitmen they contract, have made the city a difficult place to live and prosper. For a metro area of under 500,000 people, the effect is felt every day by people in the North End. In North Minneapolis, a single commercial street would become a dividing line between life and death. West Broadway Avenue splits the neighborhood into two territories, with rival gangs controlling each side. Go north of Broadway and you can find the Highs Gang, established in 2008, claiming the blocks around West Broadway and Lyndale. South of Broadway are the Lows, operating since 2004. As par the course with gangs big, small, and organized, the vice they peddle leads to natural escalation, which usually leads members to commit murder in cold blood. What started as territorial disputes over drug territory would quickly escalate into one of the most violent gang conflicts in Minnesota's history. The Highs emerged around 2008 around the streets that I've just mentioned. As a gang, they developed a hierarchical military structure with shot callers directing operations, controlling drug distribution, and demanding loyalty through violence. Members proved themselves by putting in work, aka committing acts of violence for the gang's benefit. The Lows had been operating since approximately 2004. Like their rivals, they built their organization around narcotics trafficking, firearms, and territorial control. Both gangs operated through smaller neighborhood subsets, or cliques, creating complex networks of loyalty and violence. By the late 2010s, these two organizations weren't just selling drugs, they were locked in an all-out war. The boundary between their territories, West Broadway Avenue, a known and active site of commercial development in Minneapolis, became a front line where just going across the street could mean death. On July 7th, 2019, Highs member Trevon Robinson opened fire into a crowd in downtown Minneapolis. The shooting demonstrated the gang's willingness to use violence in public spaces, setting a pattern that would define the conflict in the next 2 years. But this was still an early shooting. August 2021 would, however, mark a turning point in the conflict's intensity.
Lyndale Avenue, and two of the businesses here for years have been seen as a magnet for gun violence.
We are at a place now where the violence is continuing to escalate, while at the same time, the owners of the two businesses, the liquor store and the gas station, they seem uninterested in doing anything more than just making money.
In recent weeks, 8 people have been shot in 2 separate shootings near Merwin Liquors and Winter Gas Station. Today, the Attorney General's office, in conjunction with the city of Minneapolis, announcing an investigation into the businesses to essentially look at whether they're doing enough to deter crime and obey public nuisance law.
On August 7th, 2021, at approximately 9 p.m., a Lowe's member shot and killed 31-year-old Prince Shamir Hinton, also known as Prince Martin, at the Winter Gas Station on the 600 block of West Broadway Avenue. The gas station sat at the intersection of West Broadway and Lyndale Avenue North, a known highs hangout. Hinton was a prominent member of the Young and Thuggin' Street Gang, aka Taliban, which was a part of the Highs Association. The day after Prince Martin was killed, the Highs organized a memorial at Winter Gas Station. As members gathered to mourn, surveillance footage showed them distributing firearms and encouraging each other to retaliate against Lowe's members. All hell would soon break loose. Gregory Hamilton, Dantrell Johnson, and Keon Pruitt were all present at the memorial. They were planning revenge. That evening, August 8th, 2021, around 5:45 p.m., Johnson and Hamilton drove to Wally's Foods at Penn Avenue and Golden Valley Road, a known Lowe's hangout. They shot a Lowe's associate who survived his injuries. Then approximately 2 hours later, Johnson, Hamilton, and Pruitt drove to Skyline Market on the 1800 block of Glenwood Avenue North, another Lowe's hangout. They were hunting for Lowe's members. Inside the market, they encountered 25-year-old Darrell Wells Jr., who was shopping for groceries. They mistakenly believed Wells was a Lowe's member and shot an innocent man. Wells then fled from the store into the street. Keon Pruitt, who was driving a stolen Porsche with 2 juvenile Highs members inside, chased Wells a short distance, then let the 2 juveniles out of the car. They chased Wells into a nearby alley and fired additional shots at him, killing him. Wells was shot at least 8 times total. One of the juveniles, identified as Christopher Sean Michael Johnson, was later certified as an adult and pleaded guilty to second-degree intentional murder in Wells' death. The brutal irony was, as stated, Wells wasn't a Lowe's member. He didn't even have any gang affiliations. The Highs had completely misidentified this random guy. Hamilton and Johnson were both convicted of RICO conspiracy and using a firearm to cause death, receiving life sentences in December 2025. Pruitt received 451 months in November 2025, over 37 years. All 3 had already been serving 35-year state prison sentences for the same murder before the federal convictions, meaning most likely none of them will ever be free men after that fateful afternoon. Just 2 days later, on August 9, 2021, violence erupted again. Khalil Hassan Shabazz, then 17 years old, shot and killed 36-year-old Telly Tremaine Blair at the Amstar gas station at West Broadway Avenue and Knox Avenue North. Blair was shot multiple times and died shortly after. Shabazz would later plead guilty to second-degree murder and receive a 22.5-year sentence. The violence continued to escalate. On September 9, 2021, a prominent Highs member was shot and killed at a Minneapolis barbershop. The location was significant. Barbershops were community gathering places, and attacking someone there was a violation of unwritten rules about civilian spaces. About 2 hours later, around 8 p.m., Highs member Tyrese Giles struck back. Suspecting the Lowe's were responsible, he traveled to Penwood Market at 2125 Glenwood Avenue in Lowe's territory. Dressed in black and wearing a mask covering his face, Giles confronted 28-year-old Darian Barry and shot him. He fired the fatal shot into Barry's back as he attempted to flee. As Giles tried to run from the scene, a witness returned fire, shooting Giles multiple times. Both men were taken to hospitals where Barry died the next morning. Giles arrived at the hospital just 9 minutes after the shooting, wearing the same clothing captured on surveillance video. But on that same day, the Lowe's hit back. Caprice Richards and Marquez Armstrong Jr. stood on a sidewalk outside a crowded Minneapolis barbershop and fired at least 26 rounds through the window. Inside were customers, barbers, and a young child. One civilian died.
Not clear if Mayor Jacob Fry has enough support on council to pass his plan, or if council is capable of coming up with its own plan that can pass. The violent crime stats in Minneapolis are stunning. Homicides up 108% this year from this time a year ago. Shooting victims up by even more. The surge comes with Minneapolis police down more than 200 officers from last year. Police told council members Thursday they're asking for outside help with gun investigations.
And as you know, the chief's made a plea for to other agencies to help assist us in that, given our staffing situation.
The violence hit shocking new lows this month with 3 children shot, 1 fatally. The city's Office of Violence Prevention says it's working with the families.
On April 2, 2022, Highs member Trevon Robinson was involved in a shooting in the parking lot of Merwin Liquors, another known Highs hangout. The intersection of Merwin Liquors and Winter Gas Station had become synonymous with gang violence, to the point where Minnesota's Attorney General launched an investigation into both businesses later that year, out of concern for their involvement in gang activity. May 2022 saw some of the conflict's deadliest incidents. On May 6, 2022, Lowe's member Albert Lucas V, then 21 years old, shot and killed a victim at a Minneapolis gas station while the victim was pumping gas. On May 14th, Lowe's member Glenn Carter III shot and killed 2 people near a food truck on West Broadway and North Bryant Avenue. One victim was targeted for retaliation. The other was a bystander who happened to be present. 5 days later, on May 19th, Lowe's members executed a drive-by shooting that killed 2 people. The attack came after days of threats and taunting between gang members on social media. The killers located their target's vehicle, pulled alongside at a traffic light, and opened fire. Both occupants died at the scene. Later that month, on May 29, 2022, 24-year-old Caprice Richards opened fire at a gas station on West Broadway Avenue, aiming at a rival gang member. He missed his intended target, as par the course for this gang war, and instead a bystander was shot and injured. The incident highlighted a growing problem in the war, that citizens were getting unfairly targeted.
20 shootings and 7 murders in just these indictments. And these are just a snapshot of gang-related shootings in our city. This long list of shootings and murders dating back 7 years demonstrates what I said earlier, that these gangs and gang members have created a brutal and unrelenting trail of violence in Minneapolis.
By May 2023, federal authorities had seen enough. U.S. Attorney Andrew Luger announced a historic crackdown, indicting 45 members and associates of Minneapolis gangs, 30 from the Highs and 15 from the Lows. This marked the first time federal RICO statutes had been deployed against Minneapolis street gangs since the 1970s. The charges treated these organizations not as loose criminal associations, but as organized criminal enterprises, similar to how the mafia was prosecuted. The mafia, in fact, was the very reason the RICO Act was created in the 70s. The indictment against the Highs alone alleged 5 murders between April and September 2021, more than 10 attempted murders, robbery, and drug trafficking.
Bullets ring out day and night. People who call Minneapolis' North Side home know the sound all too well. They tell WCCO gang violence is a driving force.
Death keeps it going.
However, that almost did nothing to quell the cycle of retaliation. On April 27, 2023, Lowe's gang members Shannon Jackson, Caprice Richards, and Dante Carter opened fire on rival gang members on Broadway Avenue, killing one of them. In late November 2023, approximately 50 rounds were fired outside a Brooklyn Park apartment complex. Law enforcement sources identified the incident as a shootout between Highs and Lowe's members. Witnesses reported hearing automatic gunfire, and at least one automatic weapon was confirmed at the scene. Among those involved was Ramon Zahn Jackson, an alleged Lowe's member who would become central to multiple investigations. On November 13th, Jackson himself was shot while sitting in a vehicle in St. Paul. Officers recovered nearly 40 shell casings from 2 different caliber weapons at the scene. Jackson told police he was alone and didn't know who shot at him, a claim investigators doubted given his gang involvement. December 3rd, 2023, stands as one of the deadliest single nights in the Highs-Lows conflict, with 3 separate shootings across Minneapolis that killed 3 people and injured several others. Around 2:15 a.m., a group of men entered Royal Cigar and Tobacco at 403 14th Avenue, Southeast in Dinkytown, near the University of Minnesota campus. A verbal argument broke out, then escalated into a physical fight. As store employees tried to break up the altercation, Malik Jabril Conley, a 26-year-old member of the Crazy Boys gang from South Minneapolis, entered the store. Conley pulled out a semi-automatic handgun and began firing repeatedly at specific targets. Bryson Lamar Haskell and Chamartra Michael Sanders, both known Lowe's members, were shot multiple times in the head and neck and died at the scene. A store employee attempting to stop the violence was shot in the buttocks. Conley fired his weapon, then discovered the store's panic button had locked the doors. Surveillance footage captured him shooting out the glass door and crawling through to escape. He fled with 4 accomplices in a stolen Kia. Conley was later arrested in Chicago and extradited to Minneapolis, and in May 2025, a jury convicted him of 7 charges, including 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder. He faces a mandatory life sentence without parole. Minutes later, just after 2:30 a.m., another shooting erupted in an uptown parking lot near West Lake Street and Grand Avenue South. A group of Lowe's members were gathered when someone in a passing vehicle opened fire. A 20-year-old man was shot in the head and later died at the hospital on December 6, 2023. Ramon Jackson was present during the uptown shooting. Video footage captured Jackson returning fire during the incident. He called 911 to report the shooting, but tried to leave the scene when police arrived. Obviously, since he didn't want to be seen but wanted to call for help, officers impounded his vehicle and found ammunition inside. A search of Jackson's home later uncovered clothing matching what he wore during the shooting, along with approximately $20,000 in cash, nearly 600 grams of marijuana, a money counter, and a narcotic scale. The triple homicides in a single night shocked even a city that had grown accustomed to gang violence. They happened in public spaces where anyone could have been killed, and another massacre was soon to come. On February 27, 2024, Albert Lucas and Victor Collins, both 23 years old, joined with Antonio Deshawn Timberlake and drove to the area of the Minneapolis Market at the intersection of Chicago Avenue and Franklin Avenue in South Minneapolis. In the middle of the afternoon, they opened fire on a group of people near the market. The shooting killed 34-year-old Pierre Romel Miller of Brooklyn Park and injured 3 others. More than 20 shell casings were recovered from the scene. Surveillance footage showed a gray Kia pull up to the market, drive around the block, then park in an alley. 3 men wearing hooded sweatshirts and masks exited the vehicle, pulled out guns, and began shooting. The Minneapolis Market had already been the site of a mass shooting in August 2023 that wounded 8 people. It was now a repeat target like Winners. Lucas's criminal history painted the picture of a life consumed by violence. As a juvenile, he was twice charged with second-degree assault and possession of an automatic weapon. He had previously been charged as an adult in the May 6, 2021 shooting death of 19-year-old George Zion at an Amstar gas station on West Broadway. When police arrested Lucas for the Minneapolis Market shooting, they found a Glock 9mm pistol with an extended magazine on him. Ballistic testing matched the gun to shell casings at the market. DNA from the Kia's steering wheel matched Lucas's DNA. Cell phone data placed him with co-defendants before and after the shooting, with his phone suspiciously transmitting no data during the actual shooting, suggesting it had been turned off. It was severely overwhelming evidence, and the state had had enough. The federal government's strategy began yielding results through 2024 and into 2025. These weren't quick plea deals. Prosecutors took gang members to trial and secured convictions that would put them away for life. The convictions, some of which were mentioned earlier in the video, came in back-to-back large trials that demonstrated the systematic nature of the gang's operations. By July 2025, the convictions continued. Evidence showed they trafficked fentanyl from Arizona to Minneapolis, with Gregory Brown coordinating trips to obtain tens of thousands of fentanyl pills for distribution. By late 2025, over 90 people had been charged in the federal gang crackdown targeting the highs and lows. This included charging 39 members of the highs with RICO conspiracy, narcotics trafficking, firearms trafficking, and related offenses. Most of the men involved received decades to life sentences, meaning even those who didn't get life would lose most of their lives in prison and get out to bleak prospects afterwards. Decades spent in a concrete box on a metal bunk bed among other equally as violent, depressed, and mentally ill men. The highs and lows pursued fence sales in the name of affording designer brands and getting nice cars, and their worship of money turned deadly and condemned the survivors to a life without a shred of luxury. All of this bloodshed, loss of life, and wasted talent at an early age for loyalty to a side of a street none of the gang members actually owned. They just simply hung out at different gas stations that, again, they didn't actually own. The streets of North Minneapolis remain changed by what happened. Winter Gas Station and Merwin Liquors became symbols of a very recent time when West Broadway Avenue was a war zone. The memories linger in a community that watched its neighborhoods become battlefields, and they are, to some capacity, still unsafe areas to this day.